What happens when the weapon you're issued is a death sentence? Corporal Tony Stein was ordered to carry the standard Browning automatic rifle into Iwo Jima. He refused. He'd seen what Banzai charges did. So, in secret, he and his fellow Marines built a 1,200-round-per-minute monster from aircraft scrap. His CO forbade him from carrying it. But Stein had other plans. But before we dive into this, do me a favor and subscribe so you don't miss our next story, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It was the smell of the grease that got me. Here in the Hawaiian humidity, practicing for an invasion none of us could even pronounce, everything smelled like rust and sweat. But the grease in a machine gun, that was different. It smelled like security. It smelled like power. And the weapon in front of me, laid out on a stained poncho, smelled like nothing I had ever known. My name is Tony Stein, Corporal, 5th Marine Division. I'd already seen combat in Bougainville, and I'd learned one thing the manuals don't teach you. The Japanese soldier doesn't follow your rules. He doesn't break and run when you hit him with suppressing fire. He hides, he waits, and then he comes at you in a wave of bayonets and screams, and he doesn't stop until he is physically unable to take one more step. And the weapon they gave us to stop that wave was the bar, the Browning automatic rifle. Don't get me wrong, the bar was a fine weapon, dependable, American-made, but it was a 1918 design, and it had a 20-round magazine, 20 rounds. When a Banzai charge is coming at you in the jungle dark, 20 rounds lasts about 3 seconds. Then you're fumbling with a fresh magazine, your hands are shaking, and that wall of men is 3 seconds closer. I'd watched my buddies empty their bar, look up, and then they were gone. Swallowed by the charge. The bar was like trying to fight a forest fire with a cup of water. We needed a fire hose. We were camped near Hilo training for the next one. The brass just called it Operation Detachment. We called it the Meat Grinder. We all knew this was it. The big one. The main islands. And the Japanese would be dug in deeper than ticks, defending their home soil. The bar wasn't going to cut it. I knew it. Every man in my platoon knew it. You're staring at it again, Stein. I looked up. It was Sergeant Grevich, a motor sergeant from H&S Company. He was a wizard with metal, a guy who could build a generator out of a lawnmower and a roll of wire. He was standing next to a younger private, Little. They were the ones who had done it. I was in their makeshift motor pool, a canvas tent set up near a boneyard of wrecked equipment. And in that boneyard were the corpses of SBD Dauntless dive bombers, scavenged from a carrier that had limped into Pearl. It's a lot, I said, running a hand over the weapon's receiver. It was a .30 caliber AN-M2 aircraft machine gun. The M2 was the key. It was designed to be light, air-cooled, and fast. Insanely fast. This gun was built to tear enemy fighters out of the sky at over 1,200 rounds a minute. Our ground-based .30 cals topped out around 500. The bar, if you were lucky, maybe 600. This thing was a different species. But it was just a receiver. It had no stock, no trigger for a man to pull, no bipod. It was built to be bolted to a wing. She's a monster, Grevich said, wiping his hands on a rag, but she's got no legs. So you gave her some, I said. Grevich and Little had performed what the ordnance manuals would call an abomination. They had taken a stock from a wrecked M1 Garand and somehow bolted it to the AN-M2's receiver. They'd welded a custom trigger group, and for the legs, they'd cannibalized the bipod from a bar. It was a mutt, a parts bin special, a true Franken-gun. They called it the Stinger. The problem, Little chimed in, the younger private, is the feed. It's a belt fed, but we gotta hand link the belts, and it eats 'em faster than we can link 'em. I picked it up. It was heavy but balanced. All the weight was in the front, on that bipod. It felt mean. How many? I asked. How many what? How many did you make? Grevich kicked a pile of scrap. 6. We only had enough parts for 6. 6 weapons. For an entire division that was about to hit the most heavily fortified island in the Pacific. It was nothing. But it was something. "I want one," I said. Grevich stopped, smiling. "Stein, this ain't regulation. This ain't even close. You get caught with this, some ordnance officer is going to have your hide. This thing burns ammo at a rate that'll make the loggies scream." "I don't care about logistics," I said, my voice low. "I care about what's on the other end of that beach. The men in my platoon care about that. When that charge comes, I don't want 20 rounds. I want 200. I want a wall of lead so thick they can't even see through it." I cycled the bolt. The clack-clack was heavier, more final than a bar. "It's an unproven weapon, son," a new voice cut in. We all stiffened. Standing at the tent flap, silhouetted against the bright Hawaiian sun, was Gunnery Sergeant Riggs. Gunny Riggs. He was the division ordnance NCO. His entire world was inventory forms, maintenance schedules, and the Holy Bible, also known as the M1911 Field Manual. He walked in, his eyes never leaving the stinger in my hands. He didn't look impressed. He looked disgusted. "Corporal," he barked, "what in the name of God-given regulation is that thing?" I didn't set the stinger down. I held it tighter. Gunny Riggs walked into the tent like he owned the canvas. He was a big man, not soft, but thick with the kind of authority that comes from 20 years of barking at privates. He lived and breathed by the book. To him, a weapon that wasn't stamped, inspected, and approved by ordnance was worse than useless. It was heresy. He circled me, his eyes running over the stinger like it was a piece of rotten meat. Grevich and Little looked like they were about to be court-martialed. "I asked you a question, Corporal," Riggs said, his voice a low growl. "It's a field mod, Gunny," I said. "We're calling it the Stinger." "The Stinger," he repeated, tasting the word. "Cute. And what exactly does this contraption do?" Grevich, the senior man, stepped forward. "Sir, it's an A&M-2 aircraft gun, 30 caliber. We've just adapted it for ground use. Stock, bipod, pistol grip." Riggs held up a hand, silencing him. "I know what it is, Sergeant. I can see the parts you scavenged. What I'm asking is why you've wasted government time building a Franken-gun." He jabbed a thick finger at the muzzle. "Do you have any idea what the rate of fire is on an AN-M2? "Yes, Gunny," I said. 1,200 rounds a minute. That's the point." Riggs actually laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "The point? Son, the point of a machine gun is sustained, controllable fire. The point is to support the platoon. This thing is a bullet hose. You can't control it. You'll burn out the barrel in 30 seconds, and you'll waste more ammunition in 5 minutes than an entire squad uses in an hour." He turned to Grevich. "Do you know what the logisticians are screaming about? Ammunition. We're hitting an island, gentlemen. Everything we use has to be humped up a beach under fire. And you two geniuses decide to build a weapon that eats ammo like a starving dog." "Gunny, with respect," I interrupted. "The bar is too slow. I was on Bougainville. I watched 20-round mags run dry. We need this. We need the rate of fire." Riggs's eyes snapped to mine. His face, which had been merely annoyed, hardened. "You were on Bougainville," he said. "Good for you. That means you've seen combat, and that means you, of all people, should know that the last thing you need in a firefight is an unproven piece of junk that's going to jam the second it tastes sand." He tapped his temple. "War is won up here, with discipline, with fire control, with following the manual that men smarter than you wrote in blood. It's not won with bright ideas from the motor pool." He snatched the stinger from my hands. The weapon looked almost small in his grasp. He inspected the welding on the trigger group and shook his head in disgust. "This is a liability," he stated. "It's not heat-treated. The trigger linkage is a prayer. The barrel is rated for high-altitude air cooling, not for being dragged through volcanic ash while dumping a 200-round belt." "It works," Little, the private, said quietly. Riggs's head snapped toward him. "What did you say, Private?" "We test-fired it, Gunny. It works. It's terrifying." Terrifying, Riggs mocked. It'll be terrifying all right when it explodes in your face, or when it jams solid as a rock while a Japanese NCO is sticking a bayonet in your gut. And what happens when it breaks? You can't just requisition a new trigger guard for a stinger. It's not in the system. It doesn't exist. He was right, of course. On paper, every word he said made perfect, logical sense. The manual agreed with him. The entire U.S. Army Ordnance Department agreed with him. But the manual had never faced a Banzai charge. "Gunny," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I'll take that chance. Give me the weapon. If it jams, that's on me." Riggs looked at me for a long, hard second. I think he was deciding whether I was brave or just stupid. He settled on stupid. "No," he said. The word was final. He shoved the stinger back at Grevich, who nearly dropped it. "I want these things disassembled. I want the parts returned to the scrap heap where you found them. Is that understood?" Grevich looked at the ground. "Gunny, is that understood, Sergeant?" "Yes, Gunnery Sergeant," Grevich mumbled. Riggs turned back to me. "And you, Corporal Stein? You're an NCO. You're supposed to be setting an example. You'll be issued a bar, just like every other automatic rifleman in this division. You will clean it, you will trust it, and you will use it. You are forbidden from touching this garbage again." He stared me down. "You will follow the manual, Corporal, or you will die, and you'll take half your squad with you. Stay away from this thing." He turned and pushed his way out of the tent, leaving us in a heavy silence, the humidity and the smell of grease suddenly feeling oppressive. Grevich let out a long breath and gently placed the stinger back on the poncho. "Well, you heard the man. It's garbage." I looked at the weapon. Riggs was wrong. He was a garrison Marine, a man of paper and supply depots. He saw a pile of parts. I saw a solution. I saw the fire hose. "He's wrong," I said. Little looked at me wide-eyed. "What are we going to do, Tony? He'll have us brigged." I looked at the stinger, its strange, cobbled-together frame. Riggs had ordered them to be disassembled. He hadn't said when, and he hadn't put a guard on them. "You're not going to do anything," I said to Grevich and Little. "I am. Get me a 100-round belt and show me how to link it." Grevich stared at me, then a slow grin spread across his face. He knew what I was asking. I wasn't just going to test it. I was going to steal it. "You're going to need more than one belt, son," Grevich said, pulling a crate of ammo from under a bench. "You're going to need a case." Disobeying a gunnery sergeant, especially one from ordnance, isn't a small thing. It's not like skipping mess duty. It's challenging the very structure that's supposed to keep us alive. But as I looked at the stinger, all I could think about was the sound of a bar running dry. "I'm not asking you to get in trouble," I told Grevich. "Just leave the tent flap open tonight. I'll acquire it." Grevich and Little didn't argue. They knew the score. They were mechanics. They built things. I was an infantryman. I used them. This was the natural order of things. That night, long after last muster, I slipped out of my tent. The camp was quiet, just the hum of a distant generator and the sound of the ocean breaking on the shore. The motor pool tent was dark. I slipped inside, my K-bar in hand, and found the stinger right where they'd left it, covered by a greasy tarp. I also found a wooden crate. Inside were 5 ammo cans, each holding a freshly linked 100-round belt, and a note from Grevich, scribbled on a requisition form, "Don't let her run hot, tap it, don't hold it." I broke the weapon down as best I could, stock, receiver, bipod, and wrapped the pieces in my poncho. I smuggled it back to my gear, hiding the components at the bottom of my pack, underneath my extra socks and K-rations. It felt like I was hiding a bomb. In a way, I was. The next few nights, I became a ghost. While the rest of the platoon was at the slop chute or writing letters home, I was out in the lava fields far enough from camp that the sound would be swallowed by the surf. I'd reassemble the stinger by moonlight, my hands learning the cold, unfamiliar geometry of its parts. The M1 stock felt strange against the heavy steel aircraft receiver. It was all wrong. It was perfect. I chambered the first belt. I'd set up a rusted oil drum as a target. I got down on the bipod, nestled the stock into my shoulder, and gripped the pistol grip. I squeezed the trigger. I wasn't ready. The world exploded. It wasn't the boom of a bar. It was a deafening, continuous rip, like canvas tearing on an industrial scale. The sound was shattering. The gun didn't kick. It vibrated. It tried to jump off the bipod and climb straight up. My first burst was supposed to be 3 rounds. It was 30. The muzzle flash was so bright it bleached my vision for a second. The oil drum, when my eyes refocused, wasn't just punctured. It was gone. It had been physically shredded, torn to pieces by a solid stream of 30 caliber rounds. I let out a breath, my ears ringing. My shoulder ached. Grevich was right. Riggs was right. This thing was uncontrollable. I was holding a monster. I spent 3 nights taming it. I couldn't treat it like a rifle. I couldn't squeeze the trigger. I had to, as Grevich's note said, tap it. It was like trying to pet a rattlesnake. A quick, sharp, disciplined tap. Tap. 3 rounds were out before I'd even registered the sound. Tap. 3 more. Tap. 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 I learned its rhythm. I learned to lean into the bipod, to put my entire body weight on the gun, to hold it down. I learned to feed the belt with my left hand while my right rode the trigger, feeling for the exact millisecond before the bolt carrier ran away from me. This wasn't a rifle. It was an instrument, a blunt, brutal, unforgiving instrument. The day we shipped out, I had the Stinger broken down and buried in my main pack. My bar was slung over my shoulder, a perfectly legal, perfectly useless decoy for men like Gunny Riggs. We boarded the transport, the LST. The smell of diesel and salt water and 2,000 unwashed men filled the air. I saw Riggs on the deck, clipboard in hand, checking serial numbers on a Jeep. He glanced at my platoon as we filed past. He saw the bar on my shoulder and gave me a curt, satisfied nod. The nod of a man who knows the manual has won. I didn't nod back. I just kept moving, the 40 pounds of illegal steel in my pack, feeling like an anchor. For 3 weeks, we floated. We cleaned our weapons. I cleaned my bar in public, on the deck. I oiled it. I field stripped it. I showed it to my platoon sergeant. At night, in the cramped, stifling air of the berthing compartment, I would unroll my poncho, and under a dim red battle lamp, I would clean the Stinger. I oiled every moving part. I checked the linkage Grevich had welded. I ran my thumb over the ammo belts, feeling each brass-cased round, each one a promise. My squad leader, Sergeant Hansen, saw me one night. He just watched me for a minute. "What is that, Stein?" "It's insurance, Sarge." He looked at the heavy-duty receiver, the massive spring. He'd seen Bougainville too. "Does it work?" he asked. "It works," I said. "Good," he grunted, and rolled over in his rack. "Just don't tell me about it." When the announcement came over the ship's 1MC, my stomach turned to ice. "All hands, stand by. We have reached the objective. Target, Iwo Jima." I packed the Stinger one last time. This was it. The manual, Gunny Riggs, the logisticians, they were all back on the boat. Down on that black beach, there would only be us, the men who were dug in, and the weapons we carried. I chose to carry the fire hose. The ramp on the LVT, landing vehicle, tracked, dropped with a slam that shook my teeth. The ocean water was a dark, churning gray, and the noise, God, the noise. It wasn't just gunfire. It was a physical wall of sound, the roar of naval guns behind us, and the constant cracking thump of enemy mortars ahead. "Go, go, go!" Sergeant Hansen screamed, his voice already hoarse. We hit the water, and it was cold. Then my boots hit the ground, and it wasn't ground. It was sand. But not sand. It was a black, powdery ash, like stepping in a mountain of soot. With every step, I sank up to my ankles. It was like trying to run in quicksand, weighed down by 80 pounds of gear and a 40-pound illegal machine gun. I was carrying the Stinger in one piece now, my decoy bar left forgotten on the transport. The men around me didn't care. They were just trying to stay alive. We hit the first terrace. The beach at Iwo Jima wasn't flat. It was a series of steep, 15-foot-high terraces of that black ash. We had to crawl up them on our hands and knees. Men were screaming, men were falling, their bodies tumbling back down the black slopes. Mortars! Mortars! Keep moving! A shell landed 20 yards to my left. The explosion was muffled by the ash. It didn't just throw shrapnel. It threw a cloud of that black choking powder, mixed with the red mist of the men who had been there. Stein, up front, we got a pillbox on the right. 2 o'clock, Hansen yelled, pointing. I saw it, a concrete lump, almost buried in the ash with a dark slit. A machine gun was firing from it, a rhythmic thump, thump, thump that was cutting our platoon in half. The rounds were snapping over our heads, kicking up little spurts of black dust. This was it. This was why I'd brought the Stinger. I'm on it, I yelled. I scrambled forward, found a shallow crater, and slammed the Stinger's bipod into the soft ash. It sank. The gun was too heavy. Damn it! I pulled it up, found a piece of shattered rock to steady the left leg, and jammed the right one deep into the bank. I grabbed the belt, pulled the charging handle, and shoved the belt into the feed tray. The black ash was everywhere. It was in my mouth, my eyes, and all over the weapon's receiver. I lined up the pillbox slit, nestled my shoulder into the M1 stock, and tapped the trigger. Click. Nothing. I cycled the bolt. The handle felt gritty. The black ash was a lapping compound. It was grinding the internal parts. Stein! Fire! Hansen screamed. It's jammed! I yelled back, my voice cracking with panic. I rolled onto my back, pulling the Stinger to my chest. I flipped open the top cover. The feed powell was caked in the stuff. A round was halfway seated, stuck fast. I ripped the belt out, dug my fingers into the receiver, and tried to clear the blockage. Thump, thump, thump. The enemy gunner was still at work. Get that gun working, Corporal? That voice. I knew that voice. I looked over the lip of my crater. Gunny Riggs was 20 feet away, huddled behind a wrecked jeep, an M1 rifle in his hand. He wasn't looking at the enemy. He was looking at me. His face was black with soot, but his eyes were bright with a kind of furious, righteous anger. I told you, he roared over the din. I told you that piece of junk would get you killed. The sand. It's not made for it. He was right. The ANM-2 was designed to be in the clean, cold air at 10,000 feet, not rolling in volcanic shit. The bar, with its simpler mechanism and enclosed magazine, would have been dirty, but it probably would have fired. Riggs's words hit me harder than a piece of shrapnel. It wasn't just that I was failing, it was the humiliation. I had defied the manual, and the manual was proving me right. My bright idea was about to get my whole squad killed. Stein! Hansen shouted again, his voice desperate. Forget the gun. Use your rifle. I didn't have a rifle. I had my .45 pistol and a 40-pound paperweight. The enemy machine gun zeroed in on Hansen's position. I heard the thwack of rounds hitting his pack. He screamed. Anger, hot and white, cut through my fear. I didn't care about Riggs. I didn't care about the manual. I cared about Hansen. I turned back to the Stinger. I didn't have time to be gentle. I didn't have time to field strip it. I slammed the top cover down. I jammed the ammo belt back in. I pulled the charging handle back with so much force I thought the metal would snap. The gritty, grinding sound made me wince. Come on, you bitch, I whispered. I rolled back onto my stomach, aimed at the black slit, and squeezed the trigger with everything I had. The Stinger gave a dry, metallic cough, and then it fired. The gun didn't just fire, it erupted. That first burst, born of grit and desperation, was a 10-second roar. It was the sound I'd heard in the lava fields, magnified 1,000 times in the open chaos of the beach. It was a chainsaw cutting through sheet metal. The 1,200 rounds per minute tore a solid line of tracers across the 50 yards of black sand. I didn't even aim at the pillbox slit. I aimed at the pillbox. The Stinger's .30 caliber rounds didn't just chip the concrete, they shattered it. The stream of lead was so dense, so continuous, that it hammered the structure like a jackhammer. Chunks of concrete flew off. The enemy machine gun stopped. The stream of tracers found the slit, and the sound from inside the pillbox just ended. The Stinger's bolt locked back on an empty belt, the barrel smoking so bad it warped the air. Silence. My ears were ringing so loudly I could barely hear the mortars. The whole battlefield in my immediate vicinity seemed to have paused, stunned by the sheer violence of the sound. "Holy," Sergeant Hansen whispered from his hole. "Stein, what in the hell?" I saw Gunny Riggs. He was still staring, his M1 rifle lowered. His mouth was open. He wasn't angry anymore. He looked shocked. "More ammo," I screamed, my throat raw. My loader, a private named Wilson, was crawling toward me, dragging a fresh 100-round can. "They're pinned down on the left," Hansen yelled, pointing. "Another one, in the rocks." I saw it. A nest. 3, maybe 4 Japanese riflemen and another machine gun, this one dug into a pile of volcanic rock. They had my second squad pinned flat. I ripped the smoking hot belt out, my hands burning. Wilson slammed the new belt in. I didn't bother trying to secure the bipod. There was no time. "Cover me," I yelled. "Stein, get down. You're—" I didn't wait. I stood up. I hauled the Stinger off the ground and cradled all 40 pounds of it in my arms. I started walking, straight up the terrace, toward the rocks. It was the stupidest thing I've ever done. The enemy gunners saw me instantly. A half-dozen rifles opened up. Rounds snapped past my head like angry hornets. One plucked at my sleeve, another hit my canteen and sent a spray of water across my hip. I didn't care. I felt cold. I felt angry. I was 30 yards away when I pulled the trigger. This time, I didn't tap it. I held it. I fired the Stinger from the hip. The recoil was so powerful, it should have knocked me flat. But I leaned into it, letting my body absorb the shock. I walked forward, firing a continuous screaming stream of lead. It was like wielding a lightning bolt. I wasn't just suppressing them, I was erasing them. The rocks they were hiding behind disintegrated into dust. The sound was my shield. The sheer volume of fire was so terrifying that their return fire stopped. They weren't trying to aim. They were just trying to hide from the noise, from the storm of steel I was sending their way. I didn't stop firing until the belt ran dry. When the gun finally fell silent, the rock nest was gone. There was just a pile of shattered black stone and a haze of cordite. My squad, my entire platoon, was on its feet, staring at me. They weren't moving. They were watching, their faces a mixture of terror and awe. Move up, Hansen finally roared, breaking the spell. The rest of the day was a blur. We pushed off the beach, one ruined bunker at a time. The Stinger became the tip of the spear. I was no longer a rifleman. I was a one-man demolition team. I ran through 2 more ammo belts just getting to the airfield. Every time we hit a hard point, Hansen wouldn't call for mortars. He'd just yell, "Stein, get that monster up here." By dusk, we were exhausted, dug in at the edge of the airfield, our knuckles and knees bleeding from the ash. We were alive. Barely. Then we heard it, the screaming. It started on the right flank, a high-pitched wailing cry that spread. "Banzai! Banzai!" Out of the darkness, a wave of men came running, not disorganized. A planned, desperate counterattack. 100, maybe 200 men, bayonets fixed, running straight at our new shallow foxholes. "Fire! Fire!" our M1s barked. The bars opened up, their thump, 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 sounding weak, almost pathetic, against the roar of the charge. I set the Stinger on the lip of my foxhole. I had 1 full belt left. "Not yet, not yet," I whispered, my thumb on the trigger. I let them get close. 75 yards. 50. I could see the faces of the front runners, twisted in the twilight. "Now," I said. I pulled the trigger. I didn't tap. I held it. I swung the gun left, then right. A 100-round belt, 5 seconds of continuous fire. It was not a battle. It was a harvest. The Stinger's 200-round-per-minute stream of fire hit the charge like a scythe. It didn't just stop the front line. It physically cut them apart. Men behind them tripped over the bodies, and the Stinger found them too. The charge didn't slow down. It evaporated. It ceased to exist in a wall of noise and flying lead. In 5 seconds, the Banzai charge was over. A few survivors, stunned, turned and ran. Most just lay in a heap, 50 yards from my foxhole. Silence fell again, heavier this time, broken only by the tink-tink-tink of the Stinger's red-hot barrel cooling in the night air. I was out of ammunition, completely. "I need ammo," I croaked, my throat raw from the cordite. "Wilson, where's the ammo?" Wilson was pale. "That was it, Tony. That was the last belt." I looked back toward the beach, a black hellscape of burning wreckage and wrecked LVTs. The ammo dump was back there. Half a mile. Through the dark. Through sniper fire. "Stay here," I said. "Keep your head down." I grabbed my .45 and slid out of the foxhole. I ran back toward the beach. I found a crate, wrestled 2 cans free, and ran back. On the way I found a Marine from another platoon, hit in the leg, screaming. I grabbed him, threw him over my shoulder, and carried him to an aid station. I did that 8 times. 8 trips, back and forth, through the mortar fire. 8 trips, each one with 100 rounds of .30 caliber for the Stinger, and each one carrying a wounded man back to safety. By the time the sun rose, I had a pile of brass casings a foot deep, and the ground in front of my foxhole was a no-man's land. But we held the line. The sun that rose over Iwo Jima was a pale, sickly yellow, filtering through a sky thick with volcanic dust and the smoke of 1,000 fires. My arms felt like lead. My ears rang with a high-pitched, steady tone. My foxhole was a nest of brass casings. I was cleaning the Stinger. Again. The ash was relentless. I heard boots crunching in the black sand. I looked up, my hand instinctively going to my .45. It was Gunny Riggs. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 12 hours. His uniform was torn, his face was a mask of soot, and his eyes were hollow. He wasn't the man from the motor pool. He was just another survivor. He stopped at the edge of my foxhole, looking down. He didn't look at me. He looked at the Stinger. It was field-stripped in my lap. He stared at the heavy bolt, the unique feed mechanism, the jury-rigged trigger. Then he looked at the ground in front of me. He saw the remains of the Banzai charge, a dark stain on the black sand. He looked at the shattered pillbox in the distance and the pulverized rock nest. He had his M1 rifle slung over his shoulder, and in his hand he was carrying a single 100-round belt of .30 caliber ammunition. He didn't say, "You were right." He didn't say, "I was wrong." He didn't say, "Good shooting, Corporal." He just crouched down, his knees cracking, and held out the ammo belt. "I found this near the beach," he said, his voice a dry rasp. "Figured you'd be running low." I took it from him. Our hands brushed. His were scraped raw. "Thank you, Gunny," I said. He nodded, just once. "It's loud." "That it is," I said. "Keep it clean, Corporal." "I will, Gunny." He stood up, looked toward the Japanese lines on Mount Suribachi, and then walked away, disappearing into the smoke toward his own sector. It was the only apology I needed. It was the only one he could give. The manual was dead, buried in the black sand of the beach. We were all writing a new one. That was D-Day. We had so much longer to go. The Stinger and I, we became a legend on that rock. The other 5 guns Grevich had made found their way into the fight, too. But mine was the one that broke the charge. For 11 more days I carried that gun. I carried it up the slopes of Suribachi. I used it to clear trenches. I used it to save my platoon more times than I can lie. count. The gun was a part of me. It was my anger, my shield, my refusal to die. But Iwo Jima takes everyone. On March 1st, we were pushing through a network of caves and bunkers. They were dug in deep. I was doing what I always did, moving up, trying to get an angle, trying to put the stinger where it could do the most damage. I exposed myself one too many times. A sniper, hidden in a spider hole I never saw, had been waiting for me. I never heard the shot. I just felt a white-hot punch in my chest. I fell. The stinger, all 40 pounds of it, landed on top of me. The last thing I smelled was the hot metal and the gun grease. My war ended on that rock. But the story didn't. When the island was finally secure and the reports were filed, the men of my platoon, Sergeant Hansen, Wilson, the guys I'd pulled off the beach, they told the brass what happened on D-Day. They told them about the pillboxes. They told them about the Banzai charge. They told them about the Franken gun. The Navy and the Marine Corps scrambled. They tried to make the Stinger an official weapon. They put in orders for conversions, but the war ended before they could see mass production. The age of the jet was coming. The propeller-driven AN-M2 was already obsolete. The Stinger remained what it had always been, a one-of-a-kind battlefield solution, a weapon born of pure, desperate ingenuity. A few months later, my family was presented with a medal, the Medal of Honor. And in the official citation, the one read aloud to the president, they didn't mention a bar. They didn't mention an M1 rifle. They wrote it down for all of history. They made it official. They said my actions were taken while wielding a personally improvised aircraft-type machine gun. They made the illegal gun a part of the legacy. Gunny Riggs was right about one thing. The manual is written in blood, but it's written by the survivors. It's written by the men on the ground, the ones who see the problem, who break the rules, and who build a solution out of scrap, all to keep the man next to him alive for one more second. And if this story of ingenuity under pressure made you think, share your own thoughts in the comments. We'll see you in the next one.